All right. Um, Man, how'd you guys like the myth? We had a great video on how myths are not a lie, but they were spiritual technology. Powerful. And how about reading the book of Thomas and reading the first five scriptures in the book of Thomas, breaking them down what they meant by myth, revelation, and what they would mean. Yeah, what they would definitely mean by using the myth for technology to see the revelation of it when we talk about certain aspects, meaning it doesn't mean it literally. Kind of like myth in this way. Myth would be in this way, or allegorical would be this way. Man, you see that kid over there on that other team? Man, that kid runs like the wind. Think about it. Runs like the wind. How do you measure that? You don't. It's an allegorical, kind of an allegorical myth statement. But I know it means the kid runs hella fast. He runs faster than the wind. That would be what it would mean. He's got speed. That's a good athlete. That's what I'm saying. Similar, even though that's kind of a physical meaning, this was done for spiritual meanings, and I thought it was outstanding. I will do that because I'm going to read all 114 scriptures of the book of Thomas with you, and then we'll do it 5 scriptures at a time, and we'll just kind of break it down like we did, because we broke down the revelation, what it means, and breaking it down, which I think a lot more effective than what I did before. I just kind of got happy. I found it before when we were doing the Gnostic gospel, and I was reading and finishing books, but not really. I noticed I wasn't grasping the revelation until I started going back. And I'm being a teacher, I knew that I would take certain things and teach, kind of like I used, right? What did I use? I used a myth not being lies, but actually being technology, and then used it and showed the technology of the gnosis and revelation of those Gnostic scriptures. Yes, we did. But I promised you I would. And we got Whitney Webb today. This woman, totally respect her. And I found out some things about her, not on this video. It might not be mentioned. She may. I have not heard this video because she got 2 hours, an hour video, and I didn't really want to get in that unless I break them up into different episodes, which I may do. But she's talking about things that are really going on behind the scenes, where we know all the players in the movies. We know the Trumps, the Elons, the Putins, not Hugh. We know China, that. But what's going on around us that are not the big names that they're interacting with, and that the liberals were interacting with on the last regime that they were buddy with, and they're the same thing and the same agendas. We think things change. It only appears to change by the illusion of these magicians. MAGA means magician. And before you liberals still backing, say, yeah, oh, I trounce liberalism. I'm gonna be honest. Personally, I cannot stand liberalism. I can't. To me, it's goof troop. But I understand both sides are sold out. I don't trust politics on either side, but I do understand conservative people, because that has some common sense to it. Yeah, the people, we the people. But neither side of this are very um, not ones that look kind of like what I brought out in the scripture about knowing the loving the world and the things in the world. When you go into the Greek, that world gave you 2 examples: politics and religion. Don't love them. That's what it said. Don't love them, because they are definitely programs. Yep, 100%. So we got Whitney Webb, but Whitney Webb will unveil the Trumps, and she'll unveil the Elons, and she'll unveil some of the others, BlackRock, and all that. But she'll tell you some names of people involved. They're not the names that you really know of. It's not the names that you really know of, the everyday names that's given to you in these movies with these actors, if I may say so myself. That's not who it is. But you'll start seeing the names of those who are not in it and then go, oh, those names make sense. And you start following and you go, oh, that's the same one was with this same one. They're connected to BlackRock. They're connected to AI. They're connected to surveillance, which is happening in Asia. Big time. China, where your rights are violated. And that's what, and this is really going to have a few episodes of be aware of what's going on outside of you. I still believe in building your powers, building and conforming and being the creator you can be, because you need to stay in that space and not in the fear space, in your power space, but also have some discernment and be aware of what's happening. Like I had said, the other one, Instagram's telling you everything that's going on, was telling you all the medicine was trash, telling you that they've been lying to you, that autism, what it was caused by, and what was in it. This is all over. Nothing's being held back from you in that way. The only reason you don't know it is you don't want to know it because you're so caught up in politics. And it's not your side. It's telling, pull your head out. But those who are here will know it's about the truth. And not everybody loves you. They can tell you the truth, but don't mean they love you even. But here, let's just get right to Whitney Webb. Not a long Whitney Webb. I think it's like 18 minutes, so we might as well get started. I got a video. Now let's go. Let's go back a little bit if we can.
Enablers, I guess.
Do the sex trafficking.
Yes, but Rodriguez didn't specify why he circled those names, and he died the year that the book was published by Gawker, and also in prison. And I'm not really sure there's any information on the circumstances of his death. And that's also, of course, the year that Donald Trump declares his candidacy for president.
Okay.
In this explosive segment, investigative journalist Whitney Webb breaks down the Trump campaign's failed promises to release the Epstein files and the bizarre, bungled cover-up that followed. Webb reveals new details about Trump's close associates, the secretive circles in Epstein's infamous Black Book, and the suspicious circumstances surrounding the butler who tried to expose it all, drawing connections between organized crime, intelligence agencies, and political power.
Bring it, girl. This
Webb
girl
explains how
it.
these shadowy networks have shielded both Epstein and Trump, and why the American public's demand for answers remains unfulfilled. Don't miss this deep dive into the hidden players behind the Epstein scandal. Like, subscribe, and share for more unfiltered investigations.
In the 2024 campaign, there was a lot of signaling, not just from Trump, but from, J.D. Vance and some of these other figures, some of Trump's children, on social media, and I believe also interviews, basically promising the release of Epstein documents if Trump were to be elected. And this is also true of things that were stated by the current FBI director and FBI deputy director. And, a few months before things really exploded with Trump getting kind of feisty on his social media posts, we had, Kash Patel and Dan Bongino and sort of basically come out and say Epstein definitely killed himself and all this stuff. And then Pam Bondi, kind of followed suit. And then they released this video that has a minute missing, which obviously, is going to make people that think Epstein didn't kill himself, or at least didn't kill himself without help from the outside, it's not going to put any conspiracies to rest if there's like a minute plus missing, and then the metadata shows that the video was edited. And so there's been all this backpedaling, but it's very bizarre that they would mishandle this so extensively. I mean, maybe they thought that the base didn't really care that much, or that they could distract them with something else eventually if they never had the intention to release these things, which is what seems to be the case. But now, I think now they're trying to use the distraction or develop new distractions, as soon as this kind of boiled over and really kind of splintered and angered a large segment of Trump's base. There were releases of, documents on the MLK assassination, and Tulsi Gabbard has now been releasing stuff on Russiagate. And Trump is putting all the stuff like AI videos of Obama getting arrested. So now it's kind of trying to shift gears and get the base riled up about something else and be like, please forget about the Jeffrey Epstein case. But it's really bizarre. Particularly the most bizarre of it all would be Trump's own response. He obviously fails to understand how a large segment of his base feels about this case. by trying to, wash it away and call it a Democrat invented hoax and all of this stuff.
Mr. President, I know you want to move past all this intrigue over the Epstein files, but I do want to ask you to clarify something you said this morning. You said this was all a hoax. Has your Attorney General told you this was a hoax? What evidence have you seen?
No, it's not the Attorney General. No, I know it's a hoax. It's started by Democrats. It's been run by the Democrats for 4 years. You had Christopher Wray and these characters and Comey before him. And it's a bad group. It started, actually, look at the Steele dossier that turned out to be a total hoax. The 51 agents, the so-called intelligence agents, it was a hoax. It's all been a big hoax. It's perpetrated by the Democrats. And some stupid Republicans and foolish Republicans fall into the net. And so they try and do the Democrats
trying to play their putts. Many of us aren't putts.
Other than these hoaxes, they're bad for policy.
You'll find
they're
your
bad
putts.
for picking candidates that can get elected. Like in
Not
New York,
surprised.
we have a communist running. He may get elected too, actually, but he'll destroy the city. No, it's I call it the Epstein hoax. Takes a lot of time and effort. Instead of talking about the great achievements, we've had a great gentleman yesterday, as you know, went on CNBC and he made the statement that Trump may go down as the greatest president of all in the United States. And instead of talking about the things we've achieved, we've had tremendous achievement. They're wasting their time with a guy who obviously had some very serious problems, who died 3-4 years ago. I'd rather talk about the success we have with the economy, the best we've ever had, and all of the things we've done, including the Middle East. I mean, you see it. Instead, they want to talk about the Epstein hoax. And the sad part is it's people that are really doing the Democrats' work. They're stupid people.
It's complicated. I think a lot of people have forgotten that Jeffrey Epstein's death in prison happened during the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
So anything that would be released that would suggest that something unusual happened the night that he died would come back to roost for the previous Trump Department of Justice and presumably former Attorney General William Barr. And somehow a lot of people have forgotten that. Yeah, so, my opinion generally is that some figures in the Trump administration were kind of chosen as a PR move and that they're not actually in charge of what they're nominally in charge of.
I believe
so like
that.
Pete Hegseth, head of the Pentagon, he's kind of a Fox and Friends, he's a TV show host. And the deputy director of the Pentagon, Steve Feinberg of Cerberus Capital, is most likely the person actually running the Pentagon, not Hegseth, in my opinion. And I think that's true also for RFK Jr. in charge of HHS. I don't really think he's running. He's just kind of this figure that connected with Trump's base, particularly during the COVID era, and made them think reforms would come. And those reforms haven't really come, but he's kind of there to give the impression that things have changed. But the person behind him, the deputy secretary, is Jim O'Neill, who's a career affiliate of Peter Thiel, who's also the power behind JD Vance and, the man that made Palantir what it is.
Peter Thiel's a huge person in this, connected to AI and connected to BlackRock and some of these companies. Definitely AI surveillance. JD Vance is connected to surveillance too. That's the company. Yeah. So this is definitely big business, big billionaire business. It's nothing new. It's just moving it into the direction it was intended to go. 4 years of distraction to see who would do what they did and what would happen, where you could create the distress we see now outside our doors with all the news. And then this stuff, it's just the same old song and dance.
And so, I think it's just a way of sort of masking the people that are actually running stuff. And I think that's probably true too of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who were basically out there. They were making the rounds on podcasts and were making these connections and building trust and relationships with the public in Trump space. But it seems like they're not actually running anything, in my opinion. They're kind of figureheads in a way, and they're willing figureheads. And that's what Trump's base, a lot of them thought too. And it's kind of impressive in a sense that would not have been an anticipated reaction to these guys being rolled out to do that. So maybe, I don't really know what to think about it. It's very odd. And I think people, either it was a drastic underestimation of how much this case matters to the American public, or maybe it was something else that, has yet to make itself apparent. I honestly don't know, but it's definitely been very bizarre. And a lot of the comms seem to have been, it's just been bungled. And apparently also, it focuses on a few cell doors, but those weren't the doors to Epstein's cell. In the bottom, you can see the path to a stairwell that leads to where Epstein's cell was. So it's not even really that, the entry to where Epstein was is not actually the focus of the video, but I guess having it on those doors makes people think that kind of misleadingly, those were the doors to where Epstein was. I mean, that's not the case. And were there other, stairwells or entrances to that block of cells where Epstein was that weren't on film? I mean, again, it's not conclusive at all. Well, I was just saying it's not conclusive at all necessarily, even if there wasn't time missing in the video.
Whitney Webb unpacks how both the Trump campaign and the broader political establishment have failed to deliver transparency on the Epstein case. She exposes the PR tactics used to pacify the public, while real decision makers remain hidden. Webb's research into Trump's network, including friends and allies whose names appear in Epstein's Black Book, raises major questions about who is really protected by the ongoing cover-up. This segment is a must-watch for anyone trying to understand the real forces at play behind headline political scandals.
I started a new series, which is called First Friends, which is sort of like a play on, like First Lady. And the idea is what you said, exploring the possibility of figures close to Donald Trump, still close to Donald Trump, that have unusual, or rather that have never been reported about connections to Epstein, which suggests that, if I could find it, I'm sure the New York Times and these people could have found it too. And why haven't they reported on it, especially if there's blood in the water against their least favorite president, right? So the first person in this series is about a man named Flavio Briatore, who's probably best known for his career as a top guy in Formula One racing in Europe. He's Italian. He's also pretty well known for having dated and been engaged at one time to Naomi Campbell and later fathering Heidi Klum's first child, Lenny Klum. But beyond that, he's a longtime friend of Donald Trump. As I put in the article, there's a video of them together doing the Italian edition of The Apprentice, because as Trump says in the video, when it was time to bring The Apprentice to Italy, there were lots of people that wanted to star in it, but he only wanted one person, and that was his longtime friend, Flavio, and they talk about their long-term friendship in that clip for those that are interested. But Flavio Briatore has a few unusual links to the Epstein case, which I explore here. And one of them has to do with the Black Book itself. So the Black Book is this book of contacts that are Epstein's, but Epstein didn't necessarily write it. His staff wrote it. And so it wasn't just one staff member, it was a few members of his staff in his Palm Beach residence that compiled this list of contacts. But it was deemed legitimate enough to be used as evidence in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial a couple years ago. So it's considered to give it was then considered to give a relatively accurate portrayal of the time of sort of, frequently contacted figures in Epstein's world during, the particular period of time that the Palm Beach case in particular spanned. And so that book became public. Well, it was originally published and made actually public by the investigative journalist Nick Bryant, who's also known for investigating the Franklin scandal, which is sort of a Reagan-Bush era pedophile scandal involving government officials. And he published that at Gawker, I believe, in 2015, but he came into possession of it sometime, I think, around 2012 or so, he said. But prior to that, the FBI obtained it from Jeffrey Epstein's former butler, Alfredo Rodriguez, who died the same year it was published in 2015. But earlier, he had tried to basically sell the Black Book, initially to one of the victim's lawyers, Brad Edwards, who works with Stanley Pottinger. I forget the name of their law firm, but they're two of the main Epstein lawyers. And so instead of buying the book, I mean, obviously, it's fair that he wouldn't pay an enormous, the large sum that Rodriguez was asking for it. But Edwards instead tipped off the FBI and basically sicked the FBI on this guy. And the FBI set up a sting operation to buy the book from him, and Rodriguez went to prison, which later Epstein, when he was asked about it, said about the Black Book, he was like, it never should have been published. It was terrible that it was published, but now my butler, or, my former butler is in prison for, the crime of publishing it. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. That's not a direct quote, but that was essentially what he was saying. So he agreed with, Rodriguez being put away. And it's important to point out that Epstein was an FBI informant during this period. So, there may have been some duplicity there, but again, I don't know. But what's important here is that Rodriguez, and when he tried to shop this book around, he circled names that he said were co-conspirators and material witnesses to Epstein's sex trafficking crimes. So Flavio Briatore is one of the circled names. Alan Dershowitz is a circled name. Leslie Wexner, Jean-Luc Brunel, who is the French accomplice of Epstein that died in prison while awaiting trial in 2022. And then Donald Trump is also a circled name, which oddly enough hasn't really gotten a lot of coverage over the years. Nick Bryant, of course, talked about that, but a lot of people act like Trump was never accused. And then Brad Edwards later went out and said to Derek Brose when he was interviewed by him that Trump had actually been very helpful. But of course, Trump and Epstein at that point had a personal falling out. And also Brad Edwards' law partner, Stanley Pottinger, has kind of a suspect history, sort of acting like the Democrat equivalent of William Barr, which is basically a mop-up man for government scandals over the course of his lengthy career as a lawyer working on behalf of the government and the Department of Justice. So there's a lot of question marks there. Serial witnesses and co-conspirators and enablers, I guess.
To the sex trafficking.
Yes, but Rodriguez didn't specify why he circled those names, and he died the year that the book was published by Gawker and also in prison. And I'm not really sure there's any information on the circumstances of his death. And that's also, of course, the year that Donald Trump declares his candidacy for president. No one can interview Alfredo Rodriguez now about why he chose to circle Trump's name or Briatore's name or any of these other figures. Courtney Love was also a circled name. Wow. Some authors have speculated that, through her father, who was a road manager for the Grateful Dead, that she was sort of brought into this weird circle of intelligence link stuff, since authors more recently have sort of pointed to that band and some of these other groups in the 60s of having, CIA and other suspect connections, and sort of that a lot of the 60s counterculture was engineered for various purposes, but I'm not an expert on that, so I don't really want to speculate too much. But that's sort of been I believe Covert Action Magazine, actually, and I forget who the author was, so sorry about that. But they have a whole article detailing alleged ties between Courtney Love and some nefarious actors, so I'll refer people to that. I read it once, but I wasn't, I didn't absorb it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, but at the time, Trump was not a political candidate, and a lot of the other names that are circled are people that are well known to have been accomplices to the crime, like Maxwell, like Jean-Luc Brunel, Leslie Wexner, Jeffrey Epstein's main benefactor. And we also do know, for example, that the most famous Epstein victim of all, who died earlier this year, Virginia Roberts, she was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell while working at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. So there's a possibility that there may have been something there. But again, we don't really know because we can't ask the guy. But it is convenient that he cannot be asked.
To watch the full interview, check out the link in the description. As Whitney Webb makes clear, the Epstein files are just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to understanding the intersection of organized crime, intelligence, and American power. The refusal to address these connections fuels public distrust and leaves urgent questions unanswered. Will the truth ever come out? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more fearless journalism and in-depth analysis that goes where mainstream media won't.
Wow. So yeah, it's definitely Whitney Webb laying down. This was really all about the Epstein files. There's another video I had, and she was breaking it down. She mentioned he was part of was it FBI? A informant that actually, another video, he had his connections to Mossad and Israel informant group. Oh, EPI. Yeah. It just kind of goes with what we know when we wake up, what this reality runs on, what this reality is, dealing with poly tricks. None are righteous. No, not one. Either side. No, not one. And not surprised. So we'll hit on some other stuff. I kept this short. I didn't want to get into a deep, long, because she got some long videos that goes very descriptive in some stuff she has, where I would probably have to do anywhere from probably 2 episodes to 3 episodes to cover it all. I wouldn't want to do it all in one episode. But she was hitting on this because it has caused a niche within a lot of the people that are MAGA are right side that voted for him and wanting to change from what we've seen with the 4 years, right? Believing politics is life and brings it, which I know it doesn't. And many of you knowers know that I've mentioned many times. I flipped the quarter or the penny and said heads and tails. Heads Democrats, tails Republicans, whatever you want. Same coin, and the word coin means king in etymology. King. It actually comes from the word Cain. Biblical, right? Cain, coin, king. And what are they? The king. And there's a group in the Middle East right now, that Israel, that their prime minister, Nenatu, a few years ago called Trump old King Cyrus. Yeah. Yep. So just be aware, stuff happening, the stuff that's happening here, the stirring of the racial stuff. As you know, the white couple that got killed, this is repeating. They keep the white teenage boy killed. This is all racial stuff. And then a group and people kind of, and this is happening in Europe, and Archaic said this, it's happening in Europe. The Europeans and the Europeans, specifically Ireland, has stepped up, and they've created a group that is taking a stand against them that crossed the line, which were in Europe, it was Muslims, of them and the some of the stuff that's being reported, the crimes are committing, and the government's not really doing anything about it. And really the Europeans are the ones getting called on it, and they're getting fed up and creating like a Christian Reich. And this is something Archaic said would happen with the book of Revelations that he broke down. And he said it would happen in Europe first, and I see it starting to maneuver there. I talked about somebody with that. I said, Archaic said this 7-8 months ago. He said what happened. And then if you go look at the stabbings, they've increased. And he said that goes with it, because that goes with the book of Revelation when it says the swords, but it doesn't mean swords. When you go into the language, it means actually knife. It's not war. It's little wars, little breakouts of fights between people. But anyways, we'll get deeper with Whitney Webb as she's showing you this. They were never going to reveal the Epstein tapes. They never were going to, because if you really did it, they'd all go down in a cloud of not glory, because somebody's taking all these children and doing the things they do, because this is not new behavior on this plane. It's not new behavior on this plane, folks. It's not at all. Not at all. But we will bring you more Whitney Webb. You guys have a great day. Appreciate you. Like, subscribe, and share. And please, if you could give into it, I would really appreciate the help, the work to put it out and bring better and be better with it. You guys have a great day.